Anthony just gave me the one finger up. What for? So Anthony, what do you have in terms of was it related to the Noah Brown things or is it something else?
We have breaking news, Craig, and it is related to the Noah Brown situation.
Oh, I've got it. Dan Quinn got to the podium today and had news that was pretty shocking because I don't think any of us realized that this was happening. But the Commanders are likely going to be without one of their best offensive weapons for not just Sunday against New Orleans. Like, okay, I think they can beat New Orleans without this player, but probably the rest of the season, which opens up a whole different can of worms. That player is Noah Brown, who apparently suffered an internal injury of some pretty significant severity in the Tennessee Titans game. Here's Dan Quinn delivering the news earlier today.
Tough news on Noah. He's going to be out for a while. And so Brown. So he had a significant internal injury from the game. And so that's going to knock him out for a while. And we love him. And this play style, the identity of how he goes. And so that one hurts. He's been absolutely one of our glue guys. And after the game or during the game, between him and the medical staff, they did a really good job to address what was a serious injury. And, fortunately he's going to be okay, but it's going to knock him out for a bit.
Say for a bit, is this season ending for him?
Yeah, we'll visit that later this week, but it's likely, heading that way.
So there's only 4 games remaining. So if they were to put him on IR, he'd miss the rest of the regular season. Theoretically, based off the IR timeline, he could return for the playoffs because you got to miss 4. But that all is due to, is he going to heal or not? I mean, this sounds very, very scary. And I'm sure at some point we'll get the greater story here, but thank God he's okay. And I think, let's do the thing we never want to do for just a moment, which is to remember that this is a ridiculously violent sport and that there are real consequences, short and long term, for playing it. And there is a just cruelty to it, an inhumane nature to football that we all accept, and it's easier for us watching it than it is for those playing it. And I think there's a couple of examples that really stick out of just the bargain that we all choose here. And, this is not to say that and I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I talk about it. I make my living talking about it. So I have accepted this. I just am going to acknowledge the reality. We accept it as consumers, and to maybe most importantly, the players accept it. If they don't want to play, they can opt out. The Seahawks had a player retire, I think their starting center retired 3 weeks ago. He's 26. He's I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore. And we've seen guys do that. If they make their first, round of money and they're this is good enough for me. I'm going to get out while I can, then that's their choice. So I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad, but there is this kind of just cruelty to it where if a guy gets hurt in practice, they just move the practice often. It's we're running this drill. We were running it at the 30, but now let's run it at the 20 because, so-and-so's down at the 30 and we need to, stay on schedule. It's damn, that's rough. Just keep on going, huh? And I feel like teams do that a little less than they used to, but that used to be absolutely how it goes. And the other one is this one's fresh in my mind because the Commanders were just on their bye. And so I was watching Red Zone this weekend. Dude, the second they get an injury on Red Zone, they go to another game as fast as they can. They do not want people realizing, the NFL speaking, does not want, and frankly, the folks at Red Zone, because they want people to be able to enjoy the experience, they do not want the constant reminders that dudes are dropping like flies all over the league. So it is a scary thing that Noah Brown is having to deal with, and I'm very, very glad on a human level that he is going to be okay, / is, to the extent he is right now, okay, and the medical staff did a good job. There is then the football element, the part where we just march on and, we don't look at Noah Brown as this dude who's going through this injury. It's okay, he's also a guy that has to be replaced because they're not going to move the Saints game on Sunday because Noah Brown went through this thing. They gotta suit up 53 and go, or 46, whoever they make inactive and go. And so where does that responsibility fall? Because Brown on the season has been the third most targeted guy, the third most reception guy, the third most yardage guy, and he's tied with a bunch of other guys with 1 touchdown. His, perhaps a little more memorable than others, his one and only touchdown on the year is the Hail Mary. But he's got 35 catches for 453 yards, second to Terry and second to Ertz on the team in all those categories. Terry's got 9 touchdowns, which is actually second in the NFL. Ertz has 4. And then, Ertz is somewhere in the 50 catch range. Terry's higher than that. Ertz is beating Noah by about 70 yards receiving. And so it's an enormous hole to fix. He has been a guy that they can post up opposite Terry and say, hey, all right, we're going to stick McLaurin on the 3 receiver side and get Brown on some ISOs and use his bigger body to run these hitches and, some of the slants and things that we like to run with Terry against maybe a corner that's a lot worse than the guy who's covering Terry. And they've been able to hit that. He's also reliably gotten downfield vertically and drawn some PIs. He gets like one every other week where it's a 30, 40-yard gain. If you were to add the PI yardage into his yardage total, he'd probably have like close to 700 yards receiving on the year. I mean, he's drawn a lot of yardage for this team that doesn't go into his stat sheet. So replacing that is going to be really hard because the whole reason he's here is they don't have another guy. Jahan Dotson was supposed to be receiver 2. He bonked out for them in the spring at camp. They didn't like what they saw, and so they were able to get a 3rd-round pick for him, and thus they did. Luke McCaffrey is still young and developing, and I think Luke's the guy that I'm most intrigued by here to see, like, hey, what can he do? Because he ultimately is the closest in body type to Noah Brown. He's a bigger dude. He has played some on the outside this year and caught some of those tougher, like, hey, it's 3rd and 5. We need a 6-yard out. Like, let's throw the ball on Luke. And he's caught a couple of those. He doesn't have a ton of catches, but it seems like he's got some in big spots. So is he ready for a bigger role? Obviously, De'Ami Brown has kind of been the primary backup to Noah Brown, and his speed and his physicality has been helpful in certain spots, but he's a different kind of receiver. He's not a possession guy, so to speak. But he is a guy that can run some of the short stuff really well because he's bursty and quick, and he's not as reliable in terms of catching, although Noah's had his fair share of drops this year. But he's just not as reliable in some of that stuff. He's not as nuanced. He's not as gifted as Brown is in some of that, or as Noah is De'Ami. But he also opens up your screen game and a couple other things more. And then the last guy is Olamide Zaccheaus. And what do we have in terms of, his ability to play outside versus continuing to use him in the slot? Anthony just gave me the one finger up what for. So Anthony, what do you have in terms of, was it related to the Noah Brown things or is it something else?
We have breaking news, Craig, and it is related to the Noah Brown situation.
All right, hold on. Let's get you all. You shared it to me on my phone. Anthony, I'm waiting for the breaking news to come through here.
I just sent it over to you.
Oh, I've got it. All right, hold on. Let's see. Breaking news. I still don't see it. This is terrible for both me and the audience. Oh,
should I just break it?
Oh no, I got it. I will break it. I actually wondered if they would do this the other day. With Noah Brown out for the season, or likely out for the season, Adam Schefter reporting the Commanders have claimed wide receiver KJ Osborn off waivers from the Patriots per his agents Drew Rosenhaus and Robert Bailey. So Osborn's a guy that's got a little bit of pop to him. He and the Patriots mutually parted ways earlier in the week. So that's how that ended for him. He also has got some big catches back in the day for the Vikings. Like, he was the number 2 to JJ, so he knows how to play off a star. All things considered, Anthony, that is a pretty freaking good job by Adam Peters. Because, KJ Osborn's like a real NFL receiver, and finding dudes like that on the waiver wire at this point feels hard. I do wonder, did he go to Ohio State? No, he was a University of Miami guy. I was like, did he go to Ohio State? Did he know what was going on? Did he ask to get out so he could go to Washington? But, good for him. He's going to go from catching passes to Drake May on a bad team to going and catching passes from Jaden Daniels on a good one. He's not the biggest dude. He's 5'11", 200, so he's not, the 6'2", 6'3", guy, but he was, with the Patriots, with the Vikings from 2020 to 2023. That's where he was drafted. And then he was in New England this past season. But he's got, 2,000 yards receiving almost on his career, 16 touchdowns. Like, he's a real NFL receiver. He's not a great NFL receiver, but he caught 48 balls for 540 yards last year. Like, that's pretty good. Hell of a lot better than anybody else you were going to get right now.
Yeah, and considering he was in a room where you had Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and he still was able to, have an impact on that Vikings offense led by Kirk Cousins. I think this is a good grab. And again, we just need, I mean, the huge question off the Noah thing was like, who's going to be that next guy? Like, who's going to be our wide receiver 2? And this guy, he's been a wide receiver 2. He's been a wide receiver 3. And I think he come in here, he can make some noise.
I also wonder like how quickly they can get him up to speed. I'm looking real quick at other guys who are available, and there's some names available, including Demir Bird's available, who I mentioned because he wound up here in the spring, or in training camp, I think. So like you could go out and get someone like that. Michael Thomas. Speaking of former, that would be fun. Former Saints, Ohio State guys, go get him just for this weekend. Hey, we'll teach you like 2 routes, bro. Just. You're running route 1.
He wants payback on them too, man.
I'm sure he
still
does.
Be subbing them.
I'm sure he does. I don't know that they want to bring that dude in this locker room.
No.
In fact, I'm sure they don't want to bring that dude in this locker room. Randall Cobb's doing SEC Network. Technically, he's available. I don't know. He's technically retired. Willie Snead. So like, there's some guys out there. Corey Davis was a high draft pick who didn't work out at all. So like, there's some guys out there that you've heard of, but. What do we always say with Adam Peters? Like, he is going to find the right guy. And very clearly, he thinks that KJ Osborn is the most right guy they can get right now. I certainly feel like that's a good idea because also the thing with him, if I'm remembering his game correctly, he's got some good vertical speed. And so if you get that speed, that is super helpful to create space in this offense because that is the thing that I think Diami's got it, but he plays more like a power guy than a speed guy. Luke is not a burner. Like, he's not slow, but he's not a burner. He's not a take the top off guy. And OZ's more of like a quickness guy than he is a speed guy. So I think getting a guy like Osborn it feels like a good play. I'm going to freshen up on his stats and some of his like combine numbers and stuff here in the break, and we'll come back and continue to react to the breaking news. Again, earlier today, Dan Quinn sharing that Noah Brown is out likely for the season with an internal injury suffered during the Titans game. And breaking news just moments ago, the Commanders have signed or claimed after the Patriots waived him just a couple days ago, KJ Osborn to take his place. We're talking about it here on the Team 980. KJ Osborn, who is he? He's the guy that's going to wind up replacing Noah Brown as the number 2 receiver, likely because he's like a real NFL receiver. So Anthony, we were just looking at it in the break from a physical trait standpoint. Ran a 4.48 40 at the combine back in 2020. So really good speed, not elite speed, not low 4.4s, not 4.3s, but a 4.48. Like you're moving. His 10-yard split was a 1.47. That's really good. So we're talking about a guy who can burst quickly, hopefully get off the line. He's explosive in some other metrics too. He's got 37.5-inch vertical, a 10.3 broad. Like 10.3 is pretty solid. And then he's a 4.35 20-yard shuttle guy and 18 bench reps for a wide receiver. So he's got some bulk to him too. I mean, 5'11", 200. Like, that's a stout guy who can move pretty quickly. He played at Buffalo back in the day. Now, remember Tyree Jackson? Big old quarterback.
Oh, yep.
That was there. So he played with him at Buffalo back in the day before transferring to his Miami for his senior year as a University of Miami. And he's been productive in the NFL. He barely played as a rookie. Didn't have any catches. But he started 9 games in 2021, and he had 50 catches for 655 yards, 7 touchdowns. He also, in 2022, his best season in terms of sheer catch volume, had 60 catches for 650. So 50 for 655, 60 for 650, had 5 touchdowns. And then last year, he started 12 games, had 540 yards on 48 receptions, had just 3 touchdowns. But he's clearly shown the ability to be a player. He can do some things this year, just not a part of what the Patriots are doing. Started 4 games, played in 7. He's only been targeted 18 times, has 7 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. But you'd imagine if they're signing him, like they have a plan. And he's a guy who's got experience playing outside. He's got experience playing opposite a star in Justin Jefferson. And I'd imagine they know the guy. They've got to have a read on his character. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring him in. That's just not how Dan Quinn and Adam Peters operate. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how quickly they get him up to speed. And, like, can they get him a package of plays this weekend? because we think about what they did with Noah Brown. Like when he got here from Houston in the offseason, week 1, he didn't play that first week. It took him, they gave him like a full week, and he was coming back from an injury. But it felt like, hey, he was okay injury-wise. Let's just take it slow. We're now not in the part of the calendar where we can take things slow. And they might look at New Orleans and be like, we're just going to run the mess out of the ball. Let's give him 2 weeks. But this guy's in game shape. He was playing, he wasn't playing a ton in New England, obviously, but like he was practicing and he was a part of the Patriots' active roster. And now he's going to come in here, new verbiage, new everything, but this offense is pretty notoriously easy to learn. Hey, man, you're going to line up wide to the right. You got to make sure you know the formation right. And you got to know what your responsibility is. You're not going to have to learn a million checks, a million formations, a million everything. Like, pretty straightforward. And so maybe they give him the earpiece for this weekend, where he's one of the inactives. They give him the earpiece. He hears all the play calls. He watches it, and it's an extra week of learning, not to mention the extra practices he gets before Philly. But I tend to think that if they can get him on the field this weekend, they'll put Noah on IR. They'll put him in the roster spot, and off they'll go with him and his play volume getting larger week over week here over the final 4, and then hopefully for multiple games, but certainly at least one in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely love the fact that we're bringing in an experienced receiver. I think the fact that he has played in big games, the fact that he has had a huge impact on an offense that's been dominant, and the fact that he has the ability to separate. I think that's what I'm most interested in seeing from KJ Osborn. The fact that, he can get some separation. You talked about his 10-yard shuttle, 25-yard shuttle. He is a quick guy. And I think what our receivers outside of, including Terry, a lot of our receivers have had struggles being able to, create some separation. So I think that will be good for, Jaden, and then also just for the offense in general.
You want to know what else we should root for? We should root for that Atlanta game to be played on a Saturday.
Ooh.
You want to know why?
Why?
You know what KJ Osborn's biggest game in his career was? Think
Was it on a
Minnesota.
Saturday?
Think Saturday. This one's going to hurt you. In that game against the Colts, where they came back and won. I was like, why?
When they were up 28? They were up 28.
Yeah, and Minnesota won 39-36.
Yeah.
Which was 2 years ago this weekend. It was December 17th, 2022.
That would
He had
be insane.
16 targets, 10 catches, 157 yards. I was like, I know he had some monster game that stuck in my head, and it was a big game. I was like, did he have a monster playoff game? Nope.
Yeah.
He had a touchdown in their playoff game that year. But no, it was that Saturday game where he went for 157. And I think JJ also had a monster game that day. I mean, that was an absolutely
That was a crazy
silly football game. In that game, I forgot that Matt Ryan started that. Kirk went 34 for 54, 460, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks.
God dang.
Osborn, 10 for 157 and a touchdown. JJ, 12 for 123 and a touchdown. Thielen, 3 for 41 and a touchdown. Dalvin Cook, 4 catches, 95 yards, and that famous 64-yard screen touchdown. Kirk had 4 touchdowns, 4 different receivers. What a wacky bit that game was. And we're talking about it because one of the guys who caught a touchdown, the guy who got 157 yards that day, is KJ Osborn, the newest Washington Commander.